Commander Vexathala stepped off the transport ship onto the metal deck of Galactic Defense Station Omega-7. Her thick, armored skin gleamed under the artificial lights as she looked around with barely hidden disgust. The human station looked clean enough, but everything seemed so small and fragile. The walls were thin metal instead of proper stone. The corridors were narrow. Even the air felt weak compared to her homeworld. A human officer approached her with what she assumed was meant to be a respectful bow. He was pale and thin, like all humans she had seen in the data files. His uniform was neat, but the fabric looked like it would tear easily. Commander Vexathala, welcome to Omega-7. I'm Colonel Henry Carter, Station Commander. She looked down at him. Even for a human, he seemed particularly unimpressive. His hair was gray and his face had lines that showed age and weakness. On her world, warriors grew stronger with age, not weaker. Colonel Carter, she said, her voice deep and rumbling. I am here to observe your military operations. The Zilani High Command wants to know if humans are worth allying with. Carter nodded politely. Of course, Commander. We're honored by your visit. Let me show you to your quarters first. Then I'll introduce you to some of our soldiers. As they walked through the station, Vexathala noticed everything. The humans moved quickly but carefully. They were always looking around, checking things, talking to each other in quiet voices. It looked like fear to her. On a Zilani station, warriors would move with confidence and strength. Her quarters were small but clean. The bed looked too soft. The walls had pictures of Earth landscapes that meant nothing to her. Carter left her to settle in and promised to return in 1 hour. When he came back, he brought 3 soldiers with him. Vexathala studied them carefully as Carter made introductions. This is Staff Sergeant Jake Martinez, one of our squad leaders. Martinez was a dark-haired man of medium height. His handshake was firm, but his hand felt small and soft compared to her massive claws. He smiled and said something about being pleased to meet her, but she could see wariness in his eyes. Corporal Lisa Kane, our best marksman. Kane was a blonde woman who looked even smaller than Martinez. She stood straight and looked directly at Vexathala, which showed some courage at least. But her arms were thin and her hands looked like they had never done real fighting. And Private Danny Brooks, one of our newest soldiers. Brooks was barely more than a child by Vexathala's standards. His face was smooth and unmarked by battle scars. He tried to stand tall, but she could see nervousness in the way he held himself. These are your warriors? Vexathala asked, not bothering to hide her disappointment. They look like younglings playing at war. Carter's smile became a little stiff. They're some of our finest soldiers, Commander. Perhaps you'd like to observe their training exercises. They went to the station's training area. It was a large room with various equipment and targets. Vexathala watched as the human soldiers went through their routines. Martinez led a group through tactical movements. They used hand signals and moved in patterns that seemed random to her. When Zilani warriors trained, they fought each other directly, testing strength against strength. These humans spent most of their time hiding behind cover and talking into their communication devices. Why do they not test themselves in real combat? She asked Carter. We believe in training as a team, he replied. Individual strength is less important than working together. Vexathala snorted. A warrior who cannot stand alone will fall when others cannot help. Kane was at the shooting range, hitting targets with a weapon that looked too big for her small frame. The targets were far away and she hit them consistently, but Vexathala was not impressed. Any Zilani child could throw a spear that distance accurately. Your weapons do the work for you, she observed. What happens when they break? Kane paused in her shooting and looked at the alien commander. We fix them, ma'am, or we improvise with something else. And if there is nothing else, Kane's expression became hard. Then we use our hands. Vexathala laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Your hands against a true warrior? Child, I could break you in half without effort. The shooting range became very quiet. Martinez and Brooks had stopped their activities and were looking at their corporal. Kane set down her weapon carefully and turned to face Vexathala fully. Maybe you could, Commander, but I wouldn't make it easy for you. There was something in the human's voice that made Vexathala pause. It was not fear or anger. It was calm certainty. The woman knew she would lose in a physical fight, but she was not backing down. It was strange. Carter stepped between them smoothly. Perhaps we should continue the tour. I'd like to show you our command center. The command center was full of screens and computers. Humans sat at stations monitoring dozens of different systems. They tracked ship movements, communications, weather patterns, and supply levels. It was impressive in its complexity, but it proved her point about human weakness. You need all these machines to do what a single Zilani warrior does by instinct, she said. We use tools to extend our capabilities, Carter replied. Why limit yourself to what nature gave you when you can do better? Young Brooks spoke up unexpectedly. Commander Vexithala, may I ask what Zilani warriors do when they face enemies with better technology? She looked at him with surprise. We overcome them with superior strength and courage. But what if they have both better technology and superior numbers? Then we die with honor, she said proudly. Brooks nodded thoughtfully. That's very brave. But wouldn't it be better to find a way to win? Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed and the calm atmosphere changed instantly to controlled urgency. Humans moved quickly to their stations, but there was no panic or confusion. Carter was at a communication console immediately. Report. Long-range sensors detect a massive fleet approaching, came the reply. Krillian signatures. Estimated 300 vessels. Vexithala felt her blood chill. The Krillians were known throughout the galaxy as brutal and efficient killers. They showed no mercy and took no prisoners. Their warriors were even larger and stronger than the Zilani, and they had excellent technology. How many ships do you have? She asked Carter. 47 combat-ready vessels, he replied calmly while studying tactical displays. Against 300? She could not hide her shock. You must evacuate immediately. Carter looked at her with those strange human eyes that seemed so weak but somehow held steady strength. Commander, we have 12,000 civilians on the planet below. We don't abandon people. Then you will all die, she said with certainty. Martinez checked his weapon and looked at his fellow soldiers. Kane was already moving toward the armory. Brooks was pulling up defensive plans on a computer terminal. Maybe, Carter said quietly, but we'll make them pay for it. And maybe we'll find a way to win. The Krillian fleet was 4 hours away. Vexithala settled in to watch what she assumed would be the quick destruction of human courage by superior force. She had no idea that she was about to learn what humans really were when everything was at stake. The alarms kept ringing, and the humans kept working with that same calm urgency. They did not seem to understand that they were about to face impossible odds. Or perhaps, she thought uncomfortably, they understood perfectly and simply did not care. The first explosions lit up space around Omega-7 like deadly fireworks. Vexithala watched from the command center as human ships moved to intercept the Krillian fleet. On the tactical display, it looked like tiny fish swimming toward hungry sharks. Launch all fighters, Carter ordered calmly. Deploy defensive formations around the civilian evacuation routes. Vexithala studied the battle patterns with a professional eye. The Krillians advanced in a standard assault formation, using their superior numbers to create an overwhelming front. It was exactly what she would expect from a warrior race. The human response made no sense to her at first. Instead of meeting the attack head-on like proper warriors, the human ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Some flew toward the enemy fleet, others moved away, and a few seemed to be running toward empty space. Your ships are fleeing, she observed. Are they? Carter asked without taking his eyes off the displays. On screen, the first human fighters reached the Krillian fleet. Instead of engaging in honorable single combat, they fired their weapons quickly and then immediately retreated. The Krillians pursued as any warrior would, but the humans kept running. Cowardice, Vexithala muttered. Then she noticed something strange. The pursuing Krillians were being led into a specific area of space. When they arrived, the human ships that had seemed to be fleeing earlier were waiting. They had positioned themselves perfectly to catch the Krillians in crossfire. The trap was elegant and deadly. Dozens of Krillian fighters were destroyed in the first few seconds. But more importantly, the human pilots had controlled where the battle happened. They had chosen the ground, not the enemy. Clever, she admitted grudgingly, but cleverness would not be enough. The Krillians learned quickly and adapted their tactics. Soon their superior numbers began to tell. Human ships started disappearing from the tactical display with alarming frequency. Sir, multiple Krillian dropships are breaking through the orbital defense, reported a communications officer. They're heading for the planet's surface. Carter nodded grimly. Ground teams prepare for hostile landing. All civilian evacuation points, this is priority Alpha. Martinez appeared on the main screen from somewhere on the planet. Behind him, Vexthala could see other soldiers moving with quick efficiency. Ground Team Alpha ready, sir. We've got civilians moving to evacuation point 3. Acknowledged. Hold as long as possible, then fall back to secondary positions. The screen switched to show the planet's surface. Krillian dropships were landing like metal meteors, each one carrying 50 warriors bred for combat. Vexthala knew what Krillian ground troops looked like. They were 2 meters tall, covered in natural armor, and armed with weapons that could punch through steel. Against them, the humans looked like children playing with toys. The first engagement happened near a civilian shelter. Vexthala watched through a drone camera as 20 Krillian warriors advanced toward a building full of families. Between them and their prey stood 8 human soldiers led by Jake Martinez. Any sane military commander would have ordered immediate retreat. 8 against 20 was hopeless when the 20 were Krillians. Martinez did something different. Kane, take the high position in the building to our left. Brooks, you and Peterson circle around to their flank. Williams and Zhang set up the heavy weapon behind that barrier. The humans scattered like Martinez had taught them in training. Vexthala expected to see them picked off one by one as they moved through open ground. Instead, something remarkable happened. Kane reached her position and immediately began firing with deadly accuracy. Her shots did not try to penetrate Krillian armor directly. Instead, she aimed for joints and weak points, slowing the advance and creating confusion. Brooks and his partner moved through terrain that should have been impossible to navigate under fire. They used every piece of cover, every shadow, moving like they had planned this exact battle 100 times. The heavy weapon team set up their equipment with mechanical precision while under enemy fire. They did not rush or panic, even as Krillian energy bolts burned the air around them. Most impressive was Martinez himself. He did not try to match the Krillians in strength or courage. Instead, he coordinated everything like a conductor leading an orchestra. His voice stayed calm on the radio as he guided each soldier's actions. Kane, target the leader with the red marking. Brooks, they're shifting left to avoid Kane's fire. You'll have a clean shot in 3 seconds. Heavy weapon team, fire on my mark. The Krillians were stronger, tougher, and better armed, but they were also confused. They had expected to fight individual warriors in direct combat. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered before. The humans fought like a single organism with many parts. When one soldier drew enemy fire, another was already moving to exploit the distraction. When the Krillians tried to concentrate their attack, they found themselves caught between multiple firing positions. Within 5 minutes, half the Krillian force was down. The survivors retreated to regroup, something Vexthala had rarely seen Krillians do. Impossible, she whispered. Carter glanced at her. What's impossible, Commander? Krillians do not retreat from inferior numbers. Maybe they're not as inferior as the Krillians thought. On the screen, Martinez was already moving his people to new positions. The civilians they had been protecting were being evacuated under cover of the brief lull in fighting. But Vexthala could see more Krillian forces approaching from multiple directions. Sergeant Martinez, Carter's voice came over the communication system. Heavy forces approaching your position from the north and east. You need to pull back. Martinez looked around at his soldiers. They were tired and running low on ammunition. A sensible commander would order immediate retreat to save what forces he could. Sir, we've got about 60 civilians still evacuating from Shelter 7. If we pull back now, they'll be caught in the open. Carter was quiet for a moment. How long do you need? 10 minutes. Can you hold for 10 minutes against what's coming? Martinez looked at his soldiers again. Kane nodded calmly. Brooks checked his weapon and gave a thumbs up. The others showed the same quiet determination. We'll hold, sir. The screen went dark as the drone was destroyed by incoming fire. Vexthala stared at the blank display. They will all die. Maybe, Carter said quietly. But 60 civilians will live. And Martinez knows that's a fair trade. Fair? Vexthala could not understand. Those soldiers are trained warriors. The civilians are just people. Carter looked at her with those strange human eyes again. Commander, those soldiers became warriors to protect just people. That's why they fight. New signals appeared on the tactical display. More Krillian forces were landing all over the planet. The space battle was turning against the humans as well. Logic said the battle was lost. But something was wrong with her assumptions. The humans were not fighting like they were losing. They were fighting like they had a plan she did not understand. On the communication channel, she heard human voices coordinating actions across dozens of battlefields. They shared information instantly, adapted to changing situations, and supported each other without hesitation. A human pilot whose ship was crippled used his final moments to ram a Krillian transport, preventing it from landing troops near a school. A squad of soldiers surrounded by overwhelming forces called in artillery on their own position, trading their lives to eliminate a Krillian command unit. Civilians with no military training helped reload weapons, carried wounded soldiers to safety, and provided intelligence about enemy movements. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Warriors fought other warriors for honor and dominance. These humans were doing something entirely different. They were fighting like their species depended on it, not just the soldiers, but everyone. As if every human understood that their individual survival meant nothing compared to their collective survival. "Commander," Carter said, interrupting her thoughts, "I'm assembling a rescue team to extract civilians from the combat zones. Your people value courage in battle. Would you like to see what human courage looks like up close?" Vexathala looked at the tactical displays showing impossible odds and certain death for anyone who went down to the planet's surface. Then she looked at Carter's calm face and realized he was not asking her to observe courage. He was asking her to choose whether she had any. The dropship shook violently as it descended through the planet's atmosphere. Vexathala gripped her safety harness and watched the 5 humans sitting across from her. They should have been terrified. Instead, they were checking their equipment with the same calm focus she had seen during training. Lieutenant Alex Turner was the team leader, a quiet man with steady hands and calculating eyes. He had not questioned her decision to join the rescue mission, just nodded and made sure she had proper communication gear. 2 minutes to landing zone, Turner announced. Remember, we're going into occupied territory. The Krillians control everything within 5 kilometers of our target. Stealth is our best weapon. Vexthala almost laughed. Stealth was for hunters stalking prey, not warriors rescuing people. But she kept quiet and watched. The dropship landed in a crater formed by earlier bombardment. As they moved out, Turner used hand signals to direct his team's movement. They advanced in a pattern that kept them hidden from observation while maintaining mutual support. Vexathala had to admit their movement was impressive. The humans seemed to flow across the broken terrain like water finding the easiest path. They used every piece of cover, every shadow, every sound to mask their presence. "Contact," whispered Kane over the radio. "Krillian Patrol 6 warriors moving along the main road." Turner held up his hand, stopping the team's advance. They waited in silence as the patrol passed 50 meters away. The Krillians were magnificent warriors, tall and powerful, their armor gleaming in the alien sunlight. Any one of them could have defeated 3 or 4 humans in direct combat. The patrol passed without seeing them. "Clear," Kane reported. They continued toward their target, a civilian shelter that had been cut off when Krillian forces overran the area. According to intelligence reports, 43 people were trapped inside, including children and elderly. As they got closer, the sounds of battle grew louder. Energy weapons discharged with sharp cracks. Heavy explosions shook the ground. Somewhere in the distance, human voices called for medical assistance. "There," Turner pointed to a concrete building surrounded by debris. "That's our target." Between them and the shelter, Vexthala counted at least 20 Krillian warriors. They had set up defensive positions around the building, clearly planning to use the civilians as bait for rescue attempts. "Impossible approach," she said quietly. "We need 50 warriors to break through their defenses." Turner studied the enemy positions through his scope. "We don't need to break through. We just need to get inside." "How?" Instead of answering, Turner began giving orders. "Kane, position yourself on that ridge. You'll have good sight lines to their heavy weapon positions. Brooks, you and Martinez circle around to the east. When I give the signal, create a distraction but stay mobile." "What about me?" Vexthala asked. Turner looked at her thoughtfully. "Can you make noise?" "A lot of noise?" She flexed her claws, each one capable of cutting through steel. "I can make noise." "Good, I need you to attack their main position from the west." "Make it look like a full assault." Vexathala stared at him. "That is suicide. They will focus all their fire on me." "Yes," Turner agreed calmly, "but only for about 30 seconds. That's how long I need to reach the building." She understood now. Turner was asking her to be bait while he made the actual rescue attempt. It was clever tactics, but it required her to trust him with her life. What makes you think you can succeed where I cannot? Turner checked his weapon one final time.
Because I'm not trying to defeat them, Commander.
I'm just trying to get past them. The attack began at Turner's signal. Kane's precise shots eliminated 2 Krillian sentries before they could raise an alarm. Brooks and Martinez created explosions on the east side that drew attention and return fire. Then Vexthala charged from the west, roaring her species' ancient war cry. She leaped over barriers, slashing with her claws, firing her weapon wildly. Every Krillian warrior turned to face this obvious threat. For 30 seconds, she was the center of a storm of enemy fire. Energy bolts burned the air around her. Heavy weapons tracked her movement. She felt the heat of near misses and heard the crack of shots passing inches from her head. Then suddenly the fire slackened. Turner's voice came over the radio, calm as always. I'm inside. Beginning evacuation. She had expected him to sneak around the battle and slip in through a back entrance. Instead, when she looked toward the building, she saw something impossible. Turner had run directly through the middle of the Krillian positions. While they were all focused on her frontal assault, he had sprinted across open ground that should have been a killing field, but he had moved during the exact moments when every enemy was looking elsewhere. How did you know? She asked over the radio while ducking behind cover. I didn't know, Turner replied. I just trusted you to keep their attention. The evacuation began immediately. Turner had found the civilians huddled in the basement, exactly where intelligence had predicted. But getting them out would be the difficult part. Can you keep making noise for another few minutes? Turner asked. Vexthala looked at her situation. She was pinned down by overwhelming firepower, running low on ammunition and facing impossible odds. Any sensible warrior would retreat and wait for better conditions. Instead, she reloaded her weapon and prepared another charge. This time she moved differently, using the tactics she had observed from the humans. Instead of direct assault, she moved from cover to cover, attacking when the Krillians were distracted, retreating before they could concentrate their fire. It worked better than she had expected. Her hit-and-run attacks kept the Krillians confused about her numbers and intentions. They could not ignore her, but they also could not pin her down long enough to eliminate her. Meanwhile, Turner was moving civilians out in small groups. He used routes through the building that avoided the main areas of fighting. Each group was guided by pre-planned paths that took advantage of terrain and timing. Last group coming out? Turner reported. Vexthala saw them moving toward the extraction point. Elderly humans helping children, moving as quickly as they could despite their fear. They were everything that Krillian warriors would consider weak and worthless. A Krillian patrol spotted them. Turner, you have hostiles approaching the evacuation route. I see them. Kane, can you engage? Negative, wrong angle. They'll reach the civilians before I can get a clear shot. Vexthala looked at the situation. The patrol would intercept the fleeing civilians unless someone stopped them. Turner was too far away. Kane could not get a clear shot. The other team members were engaged elsewhere. Without thinking, she broke from cover and charged directly toward the Krillian patrol. This was not tactics or strategy. This was something else entirely. She was not fighting to prove her strength or win honor in combat. She was fighting to protect people who could not protect themselves. The Krillians turned to face her, weapons ready. She knew she could not defeat 4 warriors in direct combat. But she also knew she did not need to. She just needed to buy time. She hit the first warrior with everything she had, claws and strength and fury. He went down, but his companions were already firing. Pain blazed through her left shoulder as an energy bolt found its mark. She kept fighting, not with the careful precision of a trained warrior, but with desperate determination. Behind her, she could hear the civilians reaching safety. Turner's voice on the radio, calm and professional, calling for extraction. The second Krillian fell to her claws, but the other 2 were positioning themselves for killing shots. This was where she would die, buying a few more seconds for human children to escape. Then Kane's rifle spoke from the ridge. One shot, perfectly placed. The third Krillian dropped. Brooks appeared from nowhere, his weapon chattering as he engaged the last enemy warrior. Package secured. Turner's voice on the radio. All civilians extracted. Recommend immediate withdrawal. As they regrouped at the extraction point, Vexthala found herself surrounded by the people she had helped save. They were thanking her in words she could not understand. but their meaning was clear. She looked at Turner, who was calmly organizing the evacuation while favoring his left leg where shrapnel had found him. "Why did you save me?" she asked. Turner looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "You were part of the team. I am not human. I am not your responsibility. You chose to help protect those people," Turner said simply. "That made you one of us." As their extraction ship lifted off, Vexthala watched the battle continuing across the planet below. Human soldiers were fighting impossible odds in dozens of locations, buying time for civilians to escape. They were not fighting for territory or resources or honor. They were fighting for the idea that every life had value, that every person deserved protection. It was a concept that challenged everything she understood about war and strength and survival. But as she looked at the faces of the humans she had fought beside, she began to think that maybe she had been wrong about what made a warrior strong. The evacuation point was chaos controlled by human discipline. Wounded soldiers lay on stretchers while medics worked with calm efficiency. Civilians huddled in transport ships, some crying, others helping load supplies. The air smelled of smoke and burned metal. Vexthala stood beside Colonel Carter as reports came in from across the planet. Each one brought worse news. Krillian forces had overrun the eastern defensive line. The northern evacuation route was cut off. Human casualties were mounting rapidly. "Sir, we've lost contact with Delta Company," reported a communications officer. Last transmission indicated they were surrounded. Carter nodded grimly and marked the position on his tactical map. Red markers now covered most of the display, showing Krillian-controlled territory. The small blue areas representing human positions looked increasingly isolated. "How many civilians are still on the surface?" Carter asked. "Approximately 800, sir. Most are gathered at evacuation point 7, but Krillian forces are closing in from 3 directions." Vexthala studied the tactical situation with growing disbelief. "Colonel, you must retreat to orbit. The battle is lost." Carter looked at her with those steady human eyes. 800 people, Commander. Against 3,000 Krillian warriors? You will lose everything and save nothing. Maybe, but we have to try. She wanted to grab him and shake sense into his weak human skull. This was not courage, it was madness. No military commander should sacrifice trained soldiers for untrained civilians. It violated every principle of warfare she understood. "Martinez here," came a voice over the radio. "We've reached evacuation point 7. It's not good, sir." The main screen showed Martinez's position. He was dug in with perhaps 30 soldiers around a makeshift landing zone. Families with children waited behind hastily constructed barriers while transport ships landed and took off under fire. Around the perimeter, Krillian forces were massing for a final assault. Vexthala counted at least 200 warriors, with more arriving every minute. They had heavy weapons, armored vehicles, and overwhelming numerical superiority. "How long until the last transport?" Carter asked. 20 minutes, sir. But we won't last 5 against what's coming." Carter was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical display. Then he began giving orders with the same calm voice he had used all day. "All available units converge on evacuation point 7. Air support. Focus on the northern approach where their heaviest concentrations are forming. Admiral Stevens, I need every ship that can still fly to provide orbital bombardment." Over the radio came a dozen voices acknowledging orders. Ships changed course, redirecting from their own desperate battles to support the evacuation point. Ground units abandoned defensive positions they had held all day to march toward impossible odds. "You are committing suicide," Vexthala told Carter. "Your entire force will be destroyed." "Probably," he agreed. "But maybe we can hold long enough." She watched the battle unfold on multiple screens. Human soldiers abandoned strong positions and crossed dangerous ground to reach the evacuation point. They knew they were walking into a trap, but they went anyway. Danny Brooks arrived first with a squad of engineers. Instead of preparing defenses, they immediately began helping load civilians onto transport ships. When Krillian advance scouts appeared, Brooks engaged them while continuing to guide elderly humans toward safety. Kane took up position on a damaged building with her rifle. Her shots began picking off Krillian officers and heavy weapon crews, slowing their advance. But there were too many targets and too little time. More human units arrived, each one adding their firepower to the defensive perimeter. But the Krillians kept coming, and everyone could see the mathematics of the situation. 28 minutes until the last civilian was evacuated. Less than 10 minutes before the Krillian assault overwhelmed the human positions. Sir, Martinez's voice was strained. They're beginning their main assault. We need those reinforcements now. Carter looked at the tactical display showing all his remaining forces converging on the evacuation point. If they succeeded in holding long enough, every civilian would be saved. If they failed, humanity would lose its entire military presence in this sector. All units, this is Carter. You know the situation. 800 civilians are counting on us to buy them 28 minutes. Whatever it costs. The response came back immediately from a dozen unit commanders. Understood, sir. We're with you, Colonel. See you on the other side. Vexathala listened to these casual acceptances of death and felt something shift in her understanding of humans. These soldiers were not being ordered to die. They were choosing to risk death for people they had never met. The first wave of Krillians hit the perimeter like a tsunami of violence. Energy weapons lit up the battlefield as human soldiers fired everything they had. The noise was overwhelming, a constant thunder of explosions and weapon discharge. On the screens, she watched Martinez coordinate the defense while personally manning a heavy weapon. Kane continued sniping from her position even as the building around her was torn apart by return fire. Brooks had abandoned his engineering duties to help carry wounded soldiers to the evacuation ships. The humans fought like they had trained, each soldier supporting the others, each action coordinated toward a common goal. But the Krillians fought like they had evolved, with overwhelming strength in numbers and brutal efficiency. Perimeter breach on the eastern side, someone reported. Krillians inside the defensive line. Carter spoke into his microphone. Martinez, status report. Still holding, sir. Barely. How much longer? 18 minutes. There was a pause. Copy that, sir. 18 minutes. Vexathala could see the situation deteriorating on every screen. Human positions were being overrun one by one. Casualties were mounting rapidly. The mathematics had become even worse. Then something unexpected happened. The civilian evacuation began moving faster. Instead of waiting passively to be loaded onto ships, the humans on the ground began helping each other. Older civilians helped carry children. Families shared space on transports to make room for more people. Some even refused seats to make sure others could escape first. What are they doing? Vexathala asked. Carter was watching the same displays with a mixture of pride and sorrow. What humans do, Commander. They're taking care of each other. The defense was collapsing, but the evacuation was accelerating. Ship pilots were making dangerous approaches under fire to pick up extra people. Ground crews were loading transports beyond safe capacity. Everyone was working together to save everyone else. 10 minutes, Carter announced. Martinez's voice came back immediately, though she could hear explosions in the background. Copy. 10 minutes. Kane's position was finally overrun, but instead of dying in place, she retreated to a new position and kept firing. Brooks was wounded but continued organizing the evacuation. Turner appeared from somewhere with another group of rescued civilians. The last transport was loading when the Krillian assault finally broke through the main defensive line. Human soldiers fell back step by step, trading space for time, still firing, still coordinating, still protecting the civilians behind them. Last transport away. Someone reported. All civilians evacuated. A cheer went up from the human positions even as they continued fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. They had succeeded. 800 people were safe. All units, this is Carter. Mission accomplished. Begin withdrawal to extraction points. But Vexathala could see that withdrawal was impossible. The Krillians had surrounded the area completely. The humans had saved every civilian, but they had trapped themselves in the process. She expected panic or despair. Instead, she heard Martinez's voice, calm as always. Well done, everyone. It's been an honor serving with you. Similar responses came from other unit commanders. No complaints about impossible orders or futile sacrifice. Just quiet satisfaction at a job well done. Carter stood up from his command chair and began putting on battle armor. Commander Vexathala, I recommend you evacuate with the next transport. Where are you going? To help my soldiers, he said simply. She watched him prepare to join a battle that could not be won. To help soldiers who had already accomplished their mission, to face death alongside people who had chosen duty over survival. And for the first time since arriving at the human station, Vexathala began to understand what she had been witnessing all day. These humans were not weak. They were something else entirely. The final battle was not what Vexathala expected. She had descended to the planet's surface with Carter and 20 volunteers, expecting to witness the last desperate moments of human courage. Instead, she found something that challenged every assumption she had made about warfare, strength, and survival. The remaining human soldiers had not formed a defensive circle to sell their lives dearly. They had not positioned themselves for a glorious last stand. Instead, they were still working. Martinez had his people setting up medical stations for wounded Krillians. Kane was using her marksmanship skills to disable enemy equipment, rather than kill enemy soldiers. Brooks and his engineers were systematically destroying military supplies to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. "What are you doing?" Vexathala asked Martinez as she watched him apply medical treatment to a wounded Krillian warrior. "Our job," he replied simply, not looking up from his work. "Your job is to kill enemies, not heal them." Martinez did look up then, meeting her eyes with that steady human gaze. "My job is to protect people. All people when the fighting's over." The Krillian warrior he was treating should have been grateful or at least surprised. Instead, the alien fighter looked confused and wary, as if kindness from an enemy was more frightening than violence. Vexes. Thala understood the feeling. Colonel. Carter was coordinating with his remaining officers when the Krillian commander approached under a flag of truce. The alien leader was massive even by Krillian standards, his armor scarred from dozens of battles, his weapons worn smooth by constant use. "Human commander," the Krillian said in accented but clear speech, "I am war leader Thakmor. You fought well, but you are defeated. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Carter stood to face the alien warrior, looking small and fragile by comparison. "War leader, I am Colonel Carter. Our civilian evacuation is complete. We have accomplished our mission." Thakmor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Your mission was suicide. You saved worthless non-combatants at the cost of your entire military force. Every life has value," Carter said quietly. "Weakness," Thakmor replied with dismissive certainty. "The strong survive. The weak are consumed. This is the way of the universe." Vexathala watched this exchange with growing fascination. She had heard similar words from her own people countless times. The philosophy of individual strength, personal survival, the right of warriors to dominate lesser beings. But she had also watched what humans actually did when faced with impossible choices. "Commander Vexathala," Carter said, turning to her, "you've observed our operations for the past day. What is your assessment of human military capabilities?" The question caught her off guard. In the middle of defeat, surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, Carter was asking for her professional opinion as if they were back in a briefing room. She looked around at the human soldiers. They were wounded, exhausted, and facing certain death. But they continued working with the same calm efficiency she had observed all day. They treated enemy wounded, secured dangerous materials, and maintained discipline even in the face of annihilation. "I do not understand your people," she said honestly. Thakmor's attention focused on her. "You are Zelani. Your warriors are known for strength and honor. Surely you recognize the futility of human tactics." Vexathala considered her words carefully. "I recognize that human tactics are different from what I expected." Different how? She thought about everything she had witnessed. The coordinated teamwork that made individuals stronger than they could ever be alone. The willingness to sacrifice personal safety for abstract principles. The way humans fought not just for themselves but for others who could not fight. Krillian warriors fight to prove their strength, she said slowly. Zelani warriors fight to win honor. Human warriors fight to protect something larger than themselves. Thakmor's mandibles clicked again. Larger than survival? Nothing is larger than survival. That's where you're wrong, Carter said quietly. Before anyone could respond, new signals appeared on the tactical displays. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. "Lots of ships, sir," came a voice over the radio. "Long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet approaching. Human signatures." Carter allowed himself a small smile. "Admiral Stevens, I presume." The main screen showed a fleet that dwarfed even the Krillian invasion force. Hundreds of ships in perfect formation, moving with the coordinated precision that Vexathala was beginning to recognize as fundamentally human. Admiral Stevens's voice came over the communication system, calm and professional. "Colonel Carter, this is Admiral Stevens with the 3rd Fleet. We received your emergency signal. Status report. Civilian evacuation complete, sir. Ground forces engaged with overwhelming enemy numbers. Could use some assistance. Understood, Colonel. Stand by. The space battle that followed was unlike anything Vexithala had ever seen. The human fleet did not simply attack with superior numbers. They executed a complex series of maneuvers that systematically dismantled the Krillian formation, while minimizing casualties on both sides. War leader Thakmor watched his fleet being defeated with growing disbelief. This is impossible. We had overwhelming superiority. You had local superiority, Carter corrected gently, but you made the mistake of attacking human civilians. When you do that, you're not fighting a single human military unit. You're fighting all of humanity. As Krillian ships began surrendering rather than face destruction, Thakmor turned back to Carter with something like respect in his alien features. Your reinforcements are impressive, human, but they arrived too late to matter. My ground forces still outnumber yours 10-1. Carter nodded thoughtfully. That's true. But you're missing something important, war leader. What? Look around. Your soldiers are receiving medical treatment from mine. They're seeing humans risk their lives to help wounded enemies. They're watching us treat prisoners with dignity and respect. Vexithala saw what Carter meant. Across the battlefield, Krillian warriors were witnessing something completely outside their experience. Human soldiers were sharing their food with prisoners, treating enemy wounded before their own people, and showing kindness to those who had tried to kill them. So, Thakmor demanded. So they're learning that everything they were told about humans was wrong, Carter said simply. They're discovering that strength can come from compassion, that survival can depend on cooperation, and that sometimes the greatest victory comes from choosing to help instead of harm. As if to prove his point, a group of Krillian soldiers approached under a white flag. Their leader, a young warrior with minimal scarring, spoke directly to Thakmor. War leader, we request permission to withdraw from combat. Thakmor's mandibles spread in shock. Withdraw? We still have numerical superiority. Yes, sir, but... The young warrior looked at the humans around them. We do not wish to fight enemies who heal our wounded. Other Krillian units were approaching with similar requests. Across the battlefield, individual warriors were laying down their weapons rather than continue fighting an enemy that showed such unexpected honor. War leader Thakmor stood in the center of his dissolving army, watching his troops choose mercy over violence. This is not how war works, he said, sounding lost. It is how human war works, Vexithala said quietly. She understood now what she had been witnessing all day. Humans did not fight to prove their strength or win glory. They fought to create a universe where fighting was unnecessary. When the surrender was formalized, Vexithala found herself standing with Carter and the other human officers as they planned the treatment of prisoners and the reconstruction of damaged areas. Colonel, she said, I owe you an apology. Carter looked puzzled. For what, Commander? I called your people weak. I said your soldiers were inadequate. I was wrong, were you? Carter asked with genuine curiosity. We are physically weaker than most species. We do rely heavily on technology and teamwork. But you are not weak, she said firmly. You are something else. Something I had no word for until today. What's that? Vexithala looked around at the humans working to help former enemies, rebuilding what had been destroyed, and planning for a future where cooperation replaced conflict. You are strong in ways that have nothing to do with individual power. You are survivors in ways that go beyond personal survival. You are warriors who fight for peace instead of victory. Carter smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she had seen from him all day. Commander, those are the kindest words anyone has ever said about humanity. As Vexithala prepared her report for the Zilani High Command, she struggled to find words that would convey what she had learned. How could she explain that humans were dangerous not because of their weapons or their numbers, but because of their ideas? How could she describe soldiers who would die to protect strangers, who would heal enemies, who would choose the survival of others over their own glory? In the end, she wrote simply, Recommendation, immediate alliance with humanity. Reason, they do not fight like us. They fight for us. Months later, when the Zilani Human Alliance was formally signed, Vexithala found herself standing next to Jake Martinez at the ceremony. He was wearing his dress uniform, looking as calm and competent as ever. Sergeant Martinez, she said, may I ask you a question? Of course, Commander.